Hi, good day, everybody. It's Jim Norris from Backstage Insider. Uh, it's a new year, which is a good thing. And I have with me today Alan Cross, who has a very long history in music broadcast and a lot of other things. I noticed when I went to your LinkedIn description, it calls you a broadcaster, an interviewer, a writer, um, a content creator, blogger, all kinds of things. Pretty busy guy altogether.
Yeah, it's really tough to fit that all on a business card, so I just called myself a professional music geek. My parents, who are both, still with us, have no idea what I do for a living, and
Oh,
to be very honest and frank, my bedroom at my house, where I grew up in Manitoba, is still there. After
wow.
45 years, my parents haven't figured out that this radio thing is actually working out, and they're sure it's gonna collapse at any moment, and if it does, I'm gonna have to move home, and my bedroom is waiting for me.
So tell us about your early days with your family. Were they musical? Did they have any kind of background in arts or music?
Dad was an amateur musician. He was a school teacher like my mom, but he used to play the old Ukrainian halls, in northwestern Manitoba when he was a kid. Played violin and guitar. He was
Wow.
very much a Ukrainian music guy and a country music guy. My mom didn't really like music at all, or at least wasn't into it. Engelbert Humperdinck was her big one, and the Merrymen from Barbados. Beyond that, I never saw my mother ever put a record on a turntable.
Really?
Never, ever, ever. She liked a few songs here and there, but she didn't really have an affinity for it. My sister and I, however, really, really did. Now, I got my start in this whole thing for my at my sixth birthday. My grandmother, for some reason, gave me a transistor radio. I didn't ask for it. Nobody told her to buy one, but there it was on that Saturday morning. My little Lloyd's transistor radio. Now, growing up outside of Winnipeg, you were in the middle of nowhere. We had 3 TV channels, one of them was in French, and the only thing I knew about radio was what came out of the radio on the kitchen counter and whatever came out of the dashboard when we were in the car with mom and dad. But when I got my own little radio, I realized that the world was much, much bigger than I'd ever realized. And I became besotted with all these voices and music and news and information and entertainment coming in from space. And I would fall asleep with this little radio on my pillow. My mom would have to come and take it away from me after I drifted away. And I just became completely wrapped up in radio and in music. Um, when it came to radio, I was always after my dad to have us drop into radio stations in Winnipeg. Oh, maybe they'll give us a tour. And sometimes they did. And if we were out on a Saturday afternoon and somebody was doing a remote, I'd say, Dad, let's go see this person do this remote. And we drop in and watch them do a cut in. So this became my thing. And when I got deeper into school, see, here's a problem. If you are good in school and bad at hockey and living in a small prairie town, that's a really bad combination. You are going to get beat up. So the only thing I could figure out, and this was probably an accident, the only way I could figure out, how to keep it from being stuffed into lockers by the jocks, was to become the school music nerd. Now, I always had a couple of jobs, which gave me some disposable income, and I was listening to all the radio stations. I would go out and buy all the records, and I established some sort of cred as this music guy, which kind of saved me from the worst of the beatings. And it just continued from there. Then at the end of high school, I was on the school's Reach for the Top team. And we went to do a taping at CBC in Winnipeg. And for the first time, saw how a television station worked. And I thought, look at all this equipment and look at all these buttons. This would be really cool. And from that point on, I decided that I wanted to get into media somehow. But I didn't want to disappoint my parents. I didn't want to be a long haired, dope smoking, fast talking radio DJ. I was going to be a newsman, an anchor, a journalist, a foreign correspondent, something like that. So I took all the appropriate courses at university. There was no broadcasting course. So I took, sociology and history and French and English, and all that sort of stuff. And thinking that this would train me to be a news person. I got a job on the closed circuit radio station. It broadcast to one hallway and one cafeteria. And then somewhere through my second year at university, a radio station opened up 15 miles away, a brand new radio station. And the guy that opened it up was from my small town. Not only that, but every Friday, I worked at a grocery store, and every Friday at 5:15, I would be filling the dairy case with all the milk for the weekend rush. And every Friday at 5:15, he would come in. This guy's name was Dennis Cloutier. He would come in to buy milk on his way home. And Dennis at that point was an engineer for the CBC. And I figured out who he was, and I basically hounded him until he hired me. And that was my start of real world radio. It was a terrible radio station in the middle of a wheat field, literally in the middle of a wheat field, using salvaged equipment from when the University of Manitoba radio station went off the air. And it was across the street from the Manitoba Mental Health Center, which meant that on Sunday, when they allowed the inmates to go for a wander, they would often come and try to visit the radio station. But that was how it started. Then I ended up going to Kenora, Ontario, because you do the farm system thing, right? To a radio station, an AM radio station called CJRL, which was 1,000 watts, broadcast of the city of Kenora and surrounding area. And I was told by the general manager there that, yes, I will be the newsman, but not just yet. We have a newsman, but he is going to quit. And when he quits, you can have his job. And okay, fine. So for 6 weeks or so, I was a regular AM, music radio DJ. And then he quit. So just after Labor Day, 1983, I got to be a newsman. And I lasted 23 days because it was not what I thought it would be. I absolutely hated it. Fortunately, I had also sent a demo tape to a radio station in Brandon, Manitoba called KX96, a ridiculously progressive radio station for a prairie city of 38,000 people. And they suddenly needed somebody. So I left Kenora so fast that my landlord sent the sheriff after me for unpaid rent.
Crazy.
And I've been on the radio, FM radio, talking about records ever since.
That's great. So how did the opportunity to move to CFNY come about after your experience out west? How did you end up coming to Toronto?
Well, that is a story in itself. So I was in Brandon for 9 months. Then I spent 2 years at Q94 FM in Winnipeg. That was a metal contemporary station, doing a lot of all nights, a lot of weekends, playing a lot of Whitney Houston and Huey Lewis in the news. I was very unhappy. And then one day in September of 1986, I got into a fight with my boss. I had clawed my way up to the position of music director by then. And this one Tuesday, I brought in all the records I thought that we should listen to. And I had one particular record with me that I believed we really needed to add. And he took one look at it and he said, "Nope, this singer used to be in a rock band. We don't play rock band singers on this adult contemporary radio station. We are like fine Chardonnay. We don't touch this stuff." Well, the song was "In Your Eyes" by Peter Gabriel. And I thought, okay, I'm 23 years old. I can't do this. I just can't do this. So I did what all radio people do. You come in the middle of the night to use station equipment and stationery to put together a demo tape. So I did. I rolled up at about 2 a.m. and I was going to use Dan's studio. Now, Dan did not mind when the jocks used his gear. Just as long as you left it the way you found it, he was fine with letting you use his studio. But that night, for the first time ever, that studio was locked. Oh, great. What am I going to do? Well, I'll go down the hallway to check out George's studio. Now, George was another producer, and he hated when people used his stuff. And he always locked his studio, except that night. So, okay, I'll use George's studio to put together this demo tape. And I was going to send it to 2 radio stations, K97 in Edmonton and CFOX in Vancouver. So as I'm dubbing everything off after creating this air check demo, I noticed on the far side of the console, a copy of RPM magazine. You remember RPM, right?
Oh, sure.
Okay. So RPM was the Bible of the radio and records industry back in the 1980s. And it was a very expensive subscription. I think it was like $365. And one copy had to suffice for the entire two-station cluster, and everybody wanted to read it. One of the jobs I had as music director was to be the keeper of all the RPM magazines. If you wanted a copy of an issue, you had to come to me and sign it out. Well, here I am at 3 o'clock in the morning now, sitting in a studio that should have been locked, and on the console is a copy of RPM that even I hadn't seen yet. So I'm a little pissed off, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to have to, talk to George in the morning and explain the procedure with this very valuable magazine. So as I'm dumping off the second of two cassettes, I start flipping through the magazine, and I come across the classified ads. And there was an ad for a new position at this weirdo station in Toronto called CFNY. Now, I thought to myself, okay, well, I'm nowhere near good enough to work at Toronto yet. And besides, I don't know much about this radio station. I know that they play some pretty strange music. But then I thought, well, wait a second. I got one more blank cassette. I have one more manila envelope. And this is extraordinarily important, I had just enough extra postage to put a third package in the mail. And I'll tell you that extra postage amounted to 76 cents. So I dubbed off a third cassette, dubbed off a third resume, dubbed off a third cover letter, threw everything in the mail. I never heard from K97. I never heard from CFOX. But 5 days later, I was hired at CFNY,
Wow,
and I've been there ever since.
that's great. And that was a pretty exciting time with CFNY with what was going on there.
It was at the approaching the end of the Spirit of Radio years. The station had been on the CN Tower for about 3 years. The Casby Music Awards were a big, big national deal. David Marsden was still the program director. And even though all of us were horribly underpaid and tremendously overworked, we didn't seem to mind because we honestly believed that as an underdog, we were on a mission from God. We were out there to provide better music to the world, and it didn't matter what it took. And it was an incredibly fascinating time. We document this period in a brand new documentary that you can get on YouTube right now called CFNY, The Spirit of Radio. It's a documentary about the Spirit of Radio years from 1977 to about 1991. And if you watch that documentary, you can see me and a whole bunch of other people doing what we did to create that, legendary one-time only radio station.
Wow. We used to work with David Marsden on the Casby Awards. We did the program for that for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
David was just incredible to work with. He just came up with some unbelievable ideas.
Yeah, he was a one-of-a-kind character, and he figures very, very, very prominently in the documentary.
For sure. So, when did CFNY change to The Edge? When was that branding change, I guess?
Well, there was some ownership hassles towards the end of the 1980s. David left. He was under pressure to make the station more commercial because the powers that be wanted more money coming out of
Right.
the radio station. Um, the station was sold from Selkirk to Rogers, but Rogers had too many stations in the market per CRTC rules. So we went into this period of escrow while they sorted everything out and figured out who they were going to divest us to. And during that time, we had what we called the mistake of 88, which is when the radio station, under the control of this new group of internal people who thought that they could save their jobs and turn the radio station into something it wasn't, began playing all kinds of top 40 music mixed in with the alternative music that we were playing. And there was open revolt within the staff. It was not good. And there was open revolt from the fans, and it was not good. Again, this is all documented in the film. And when Rogers finally divested us, they divested us to McLean Hunter. And McLean Hunter was a little annoyed because they had bought a red car, but in the meantime, the people on staff had painted it blue. So all those people were gone, and the staff remained. And we were still very much, while we went back to being what we were in the spirit of radio years, except that we probably went way too far to the left. we we were playing some, yeah, it was fun, but it was not entirely very accessible. Then there was another sale. McLean Hunter sold us to Shaw Communications. And Shaw came in with a very professional, very traditional radio management team. And at first, they were going to change us. They were going to flip us to country because, again, this is the early 90s, so like 92. And we're starting to have, Shania Twain and Garth Brooks and all that sort of stuff. And it was like, okay, well, this is the hot new format. We're going to go to that. But they did some audience research and they realized that there was something really going on, had been going on since 1991, especially after the sound scan change in March of 91, which showed that alternative acts were selling far more records than the industry had thought of, I believed, to that time. And they thought, oh, okay, well, this seems to be a big deal. Demographics are on our side. The radio station has a long, long history of playing this sort of music and catering to this kind of audience. So we'll abandon these dreams of turning us into a country station and we will clean up the radio station. We'll rebrand it as 102. Well, what was it called? Edge 102 at first. And then somewhere in there was FM 102. And then finally 102.1 The Edge. Because the trend was to give radio stations nicknames back then rather than their
Right.
call letters. And that had to do with car radios. You wanted to say the exact digital frequency, 102.1, in your call letters to reinforce listening. And we got rid of the freeform radio. We cleaned up a lot of baggage. And believe me, there was a tremendous amount of baggage. Any radio station. That was, but this time almost 15 years. It was 15 years. And the things needed to be sorted. And they were. And that's how the station it was established in the early 90s and went through another glory period in the 1990s.
And the Edge got up to some pretty amazing numbers.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure it defied some people's perception of what was possible because they were I remember one year they were right up there with CFRB, which as an AM station had crazy numbers as well. But the Edge, it was sort of the two of them were right on, and it was a pretty huge market share.
Yeah, we rode a second wave. We rode the grunge and Gen X and Lollapalooza wave. And that lasted from 92 through to, things started to get pretty wobbly in late 96 and early 97 as that demographic aged out of their, festival going years. And the economy changed. It wasn't nearly as ugly as it was in the early 90s. Bill Clinton came in, everybody was happy, everybody was cool. All the wars were over for the time being. The Soviet Union had fallen, the Cold War was over, and the mood was one of that was better served by pop music. And that's where we have the Spice Girls and Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera and Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. It's just the normal sort of cycle of rock versus pop music. And so that created some problems for us, because there wasn't a lot of really solid alternative stuff at the end of the 90s. And we had to wait for another wave of UX in the early 2000s before we had another wave that went through until about 2007. Spotify comes online in 2008. And then we have this massive fracturing and fragmenting and segmenting of popular music. And this affected everybody. Radio was no longer the place to go for music. It was streaming. And we've had to, like every other radio station, adopt to the new digital realities.
So where do you feel radio is at now? Uh, with all the
Well,
changes that have
I
gone.
find it rather interesting that on August 1st, 1981, MTV debuted with a song called Video Killed the Radio Star. And then at the end of December of 2025, MTV shut down its last video channels by playing Video Killed the Radio Star. So guess what? It was a failure. 45 years. and the radio stars are still here, which will tell you something. Now, radio has evolved from what it used to be, which was just this thing that you turned on and listened to in the car, at home, or wherever, to something that has websites and videos and text and downloads and YouTube stuff. And, we were much more of a multimedia thing. It's not just radio, it's audio. So we have become these audio creation companies, and we are distributing our material through a variety of sources. It has been hard because any technological transition is difficult to weather, especially with so many things happening all at once. But radio, I think, is going to evolve into two directions. First of all, you're going to have the mass appeal radio stations, which have AI personalities and just basically our stream of music, right? On one side. On the other side, you're going to have boutique radio stations, human powered radio, which is going to be vastly different from the, lowest common denominator AI radio stations. And I think the numbers may be smaller. I don't know. I hope not. But the authenticity and the humanity of these boutique stations, this bifurcation, is going to be something that carries radio forward. Now, one of the things that we have to be really conscious of is, distribution. AM radio is not doing well right now. It doesn't sound very good. Doesn't work in a lot of electric cars. It's not even available in a lot of cars. So something is going to have to happen with AM radio. That's the next big shakeup, I think. AM radio lasted as long as it did, largely because of talk radio and specifically right wing talk radio. Now that everybody has moved away from that into, Fox News on TV and social media like X and Truth Social, AM radio is slowly drifting away, which is unfortunate because I think that AM radio has a sound and vibe and feel that all its own. I'm going to miss it, but even on the FM side, how much longer are we going to run these expensive FM towers with this huge transmitter? Are we going to move to some sort of other distribution platform? Now, it can't be digital audio broadcasting, DAB, because that was killed by the Americans about 25 years ago, even though DAB is big in the UK and in Europe and in Australia and in Russia and a bunch of other places. So it's not going to be DAB. It is not going to be HD radio because that seems to be, have fallen flat. Nobody really cares. So what will it take? Will it be distribution via IP, Internet Protocol? We get to, 6G, and that's coming, where you have data streams that are much, much more robust and fast than 5G, and will allow for this two-way communication between the receiver, the radio receiver, and the radio broadcaster. What will that mean? I don't know. So we'll see. It's a long, slow process, but radio is not going anywhere in the meantime. Radio is still very popular, very powerful, very profitable. Um, there was a survey towards the end of last year that said that 81% minimum, 81% of Canadians use radio every week.
Well,
And another really interesting stat from the end of the year was that for the first time in a long time, radio listening in the home is going up. It used to be for years that the main place for radio was listening in the car. And that's still a big deal. But listening at home has gone up. And
well,
that's probably attributable to listening on smart speakers.
that's amazing. So, as an artist or an artist manager or a record company, when they're plotting out their attack, I guess you could call it, how important do you think radio is? From a lot they I hear a lot of negativity, but
Mm.
I don't believe it. I still think it's important to have your songs on radio.
I get somewhere around 500 or 600 pitches every week from artists and managers and publicists around the world. You know what
Well,
they want? They want radio airplay.
right.
So there is no way that's faster of creating a hit than getting a song on the radio. That's always the way it's been. It's still the way it is now.
For sure, and it drives so many other things. I mean, it drives attendance at live performances, big time being on the radio, and obviously the performing rights money that
Hmm.
a songwriter can get if they get a hit on radio and everything else, merch sales and all the other things. I remember years and years ago being at a party with the guys from the Guess Who, and it was just when These Eyes broke. And I was talking to Gary Peterson, and they were just shocked, like what happened to their career. And it was almost instant. They were going from $500 a night playing at the Pav in Aurelia to getting $10,000 a night, and it was almost instant. It was a course of a few months, and that was just from These Eyes getting massive airplay that it got. And of course, they went on to do a lot better than over time. But I think some of the artists, it's not easy to get on radio. As you say, you get a lot of submissions. So I think some people just give up on it. They just say, well, this is too hard. I can just, throw my stuff in social media and everything will be fine. But they're fooling themselves, I think.
I think so too. 100,000 songs get uploaded to Spotify every single day, and more of those songs are AI songs. So the last number I heard was that Spotify had something like 256 million songs in their library. So that's essentially the entire library of human recorded music. That's what you're competing with. And
Wow.
if you just throw yourself up into, social media and streaming, good luck being found. It's getting muddier and muddier and muddier and harder to be discovered. And music discovery is one of the biggest problems we have right now. Nobody really knows, what's out there, what am I going to like? And, how do I reach people that I know will like my music? Well, radio still works. If you are of a certain genre and you want to reach lots of people very quickly, get on the radio if you can.
So at the Edge nowadays, how many songs would they add in a week? As
It
in,
depends week to week. I mean, when I was the program director, it could be as little as 0, depending on how the songs were performing, to as
right.
many as 5 or 6.
Okay. But given all the submissions you get, that's not a big number.
Well, no, I mean, it's not a big number, and it never has been a big number, and it's supposed to be hard to get on the radio because you're competing with the best in the world. If
Right.
you are not judged to be by people who this is their job. Their job is to judge. And if you can't convince them that you're among the best in the world, well, you're not going to get on the radio.
That's for sure. So, the other parts of your life, I guess, aside from broadcasting, I read the list there. You've written a few books,
Mhm.
and you also go out and give talks live. And tell us about that. What are those about? And if somebody buys a ticket, what do they get? What do they look forward to? Except
Well, I'm going to
obviously
be
your crazy sense of humor is part of it.
well, I'm going to be brutally honest about it. These are the laziest presentations anybody can do. I've done well over 100 of them, and they
Wow.
basically start this way. People buy a ticket, they come in, and I ask them, "What do you want to talk about?" And we go off for 2 hours. People are dying for information
Right.
and dying for credible opinion on what's going on with their favorite music. And then I, divert into, some old man stories about some of the things and some of the people I've seen. And it turns out to be a good time. The fascinating thing is that again, over 100 of these shows, and no two have ever been the same.
Wow.
They have all been different. Even when I go back to the same venue in the same town repeatedly, different from last time because the audience is different.
Right.
It's good. It's good market research for me because remember what radio people do? We sit in a room by ourselves talking to ourselves, and we never get to see who we're actually talking to. So here is an opportunity to come face to face with these, invisible listeners and to find out what they really think, what they really want, what they're really into, what they really care about. And it's been very, very illuminating.
And are many of those up and coming musicians that attend and people that are in the industry, or is it mostly the
No, well, there are a lot of musicians that come. A lot of parents bring their kids. A lot
right?
of young musicians come and hope to ask, for advice. So yeah, it's a fascinating mix. They can be as young as 10, and they can be as old as 80.
Wow. I think it provides a good service though, because people are getting access to some valuable information and insights at a really reasonable cost, but they are paying for it. So
Mm.
it's quality. It's not just,
Well,
giving it away.
right. I try to make it as honest and as quality as possible. And I say, listen, if you have any questions about how things work in the music business, in the radio business, let's talk about them. One of the things that does come up a lot is the price of concert tickets. And I
Right.
can spend about 35 minutes going through why concert tickets are so expensive and why breaking up Live Nation isn't going to bring concert ticket prices down.
No,
And it's a very illuminating thing. People think that StubHub is owned by Ticketmaster. Well, it's not. They think that Ticketmaster is the entity that sets ticket prices. Well, it does not. So we go through some of that stuff, and my goal is, I always tell people this. My goal is to make your musical life richer. When you go home, I want you to have learned something, have met somebody, have started thinking about something that will make you a more informed music fan.
that's great. So, with your life the way it is, how do you balance your time? What's your secret to time management?
Uh,
I think it was Jason McCoy asked that, and he just said it's a disaster. He said
well, we forgot to have kids, so that's we were
that
just too busy.
helps.
Does help. Um, I don't know. I've been working out of my house since 2011, so I've developed some procedures and protocols and methods and timelines and time management plans, and I've got it nailed down pretty well. And as I get older, I am putting more and more boundaries on what I do and not do. For example, Saturday and Sunday, most of Sunday, all of Saturday and most of Sunday is no computer. I try not to go online at all,
Right.
just to save my sanity. Um, Secondly, at 5 o'clock, I stop. I work a regular work day. I'm at my desk by 7:30. I stop for lunch. Because I work at home, I have a quick nap. Then I'm back at it for the afternoon. And then between 4:30 and 5, one of the English Bull Terriers comes down here and tells me that it's time to stop work. So I do. And then in the evening, I'll maybe, pick at some email in front of the TV and then go to bed around 9:30, 10 o'clock. But, no more late nights, no more, no more, uh, taking care of my health, you know, not, uh, you know, not doing late nights unless I'm working at something. And my wife keeps me very, very grounded. We have a very, very tight personal life, and we have a very close circle of friends, and that keeps things real.
That's great. So, what about plans for the future? What are your any new projects coming up in the next year or two?
Well, there are a bunch of things that are happening simultaneously. This CFNY documentary seems to have lit a fire under a couple of other ideas. I continue to do a lot of the speaking things, and the speaking things continue to expand. There was a company in the UK that recently reached out to me and said that maybe we should talk. I'm doing more narration and commercial voiceover work. I've got my two podcasts, one of which has been optioned for a TV show, so that could turn into something. Uh, and what else? Whatever else comes along. I'll tell you. Back in 2011, I did a stage production with William Shatner called "How Time Flies," and I
Wow.
spent 3 weeks on the road with him. And I learned more about presentation and performance from him in those 3 weeks that I had in the previous 25 years. He was great. And one
Oh,
of the things he taught me was say yes to everything. Somebody
right.
comes along with an idea or a possibility or opportunity, say yes. 99 times out of 100, it's going to fail. But that one time will change your life. And he has proven to be 100% correct.
Yeah, and I
And
think
so
that's
that's how
important.
I look at things. I will always entertain ideas. It'll probably fall flat in his face, but I'll at least have a listen to it. And who knows?
I think that's important to say yes, even if you don't know for sure if you can do it, because if you have confidence in yourself, you'll figure it out.
Yeah, you will. And, pay attention to your gut. If it doesn't feel like it's the right thing, there's something about gut feelings that I've learned to trust. And I'm more and more attuned with that.
That's for sure. Well,
That comes
thanks.
with age. That can only come with age.
That's for sure. So, once we post this up, we'll put your website on there so people can follow up. And you're fairly open with your email address,
Oh,
so if
yeah.
people want to follow up, they can. So, thanks a lot for your time today, and best. I'll definitely check out that documentary. I'm really interested in that.
Listen, it has been up for about 7 days, and let's just have a look here, Jim.
Sure.
TVO, CFNY documentary. Here it is. 7 days, and it has had 89,000 views.
Wow,
We're
that's
pretty happy.
amazing.
Yeah.
And not spending a lot of money on promotion or anything. It's mostly
Zero
viral.
money promotion.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Wow. Good stuff. So, yeah, again, thank you very much and have a great year.
No, thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Okay.